Welcome to the Queen of Hearts podcast. And here's the queen herself, registered dietitian Heather Klug.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Queen of Hearts podcast. I'm Heather Klug, registered dietitian with the Karen Yance Women's Cardiac Awareness Center. With me today, as usual, is Bethany DeBrew-Adams, our health communications coordinator.
As usual, huh? Now I'm suddenly as usual.
Oh,
no,
and it made it that way.
It's okay.
Okay, do you want me to redo that?
No.
And with me today is the lovely Princess of Hearts, Bethany DeBrew-Adams.
Thank you, Heather. That's such a lovely way to introduce me.
Now, we've talked about alcohol and how it can be both beneficial and problematic for your heart, right, Bethany? Mm-hmm. We've talked about that before on this podcast.
Right.
But today, we wanted to speak specifically about women and the rise of alcohol use.
Yes. This is something you and I have talked about numerous times just on our own, but we thought it would be a good topic to cover.
Yeah. Now, pre-pandemic, rates of alcohol use, heavy drinking, and alcohol-related disorders in women were already rising. Between 2001 and 2002, and then 2012 and 13, there was a 16% increase in the proportion of women who drink alcohol.
Ooh.
A 58% increase in women's heavy drinking.
Ouch.
This is compared to 16% in men.
Yeah.
So 58% increase in women.
Right. That's a lot.
Yeah. And an 84% increase in women's 1-year prevalence of an alcohol use disorder. And this is compared to 35% in men.
Right. Now, it should be noted that men have usually been the sex that drinks more. Mm-hmm. So women had more catching up to do in that respect.
Well,
but that's a lot of catching up in a short amount of time.
I don't know if we need to be catching up in this category.
Exactly. And you mentioned pre-pandemic, those numbers were rising. Well, with the COVID pandemic, the numbers have been going up even more, unfortunately.
Yeah.
According to a RAND Corporation study, during the pandemic, women have increased their heavy drinking days by 41% compared with before the pandemic. And additional research has shown that the psychological stress related to COVID-19 was associated with greater drinking for women, but not for men.
Ah.
So there was a study that was published in the Journal of Gynecology and Women's Health that said nearly 2/3 of women reported drinking more since the beginning of the pandemic, including increases in daily drinking, drinking earlier in the day, and binge drinking, which we're going to talk about later.
Yeah.
And interestingly, while marriage and children are typically associated with lower levels of alcohol consumption among women, this study showed that married women were experiencing the greatest increases in alcohol use compared to other women during the pandemic.
I can maybe understand that one a little bit. Not that
Yeah.
I have been drinking more. I have had many nights where I've thought about having a drink, and then because I've had so many things to do, by the time I sit down to even
It's too late.
to drink one, it's like 9:30, and it's like, well, I'm not going to drink one now. Now
Yeah.
it's too late. But I can see that because women have had a lot more, I would say, of the burdens put on them. Mm-hmm. You know, they're working still. They're having to juggle, often working from home, trying to do meetings with kids interrupting them. Mm-hmm. Like, I've read a lot of things saying women tend to, like, especially if they don't make as much money as their husbands do, that they let their husband have the office. And then they're out kind of dealing with the kids.
Ooh.
You know what I mean? And then just dealing with the kids and, you know, remote learning if the kids were at home. It's just like they already had more of the share of housework to begin with. Studies show that. It may be equal in some households. I'm not saying men aren't helping at all. But women are still often doing more at home compared to men. And then this hits, and now they've got these extra things to deal with, too. Now they're a teacher.
Yeah.
And making sure their kids are doing what they need to be doing.
Right. And you and I both worked from home for, 6 months last year.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you. I mean, I don't have kids, so I didn't have that extra stress. But there's something about being at home where there's always something that needs to be done. And you're kind of like, since I'm here, I should throw in a load of laundry, or I
yeah.
should vacuum the whatever. And, there's always something else that needs to be done. So you're a teacher, you're also cleaning your house, you're doing all those little things throughout the day that you normally would, wait till the weekend to do or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's compounding it too.
Right.
And then as late as February 2021, a survey by the American Psychiatric Association found that nearly 1 in 4 adults, now this is adults, this includes men, so they reported drinking specifically to cope with stress. Particularly 52% of parents with kids ages 5 to 7.
Yeah, I can see that, to be honest. Now, my kids are older. They're 12 and 14. And I do have to say I don't think it was as stressful for me. I mean, it was a little stressful with my kids at home and helping them with stuff here and there, but they were pretty independent. So I honestly can't complain too much.
Right.
But if I had a kid in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and now I got to learn, like my kids already knew how to do their whole like online system because they did it in the spring.
Sure.
Right? They were very comfortable with using the technology. A 5 or a 6-year-old? Probably not so much.
Well,
you're going to have
to sit still.
And sit still for the, I mean, I heard that from a lot of parents.
Yeah.
Like they had to sit there with their kids and now they got to try to do their own meetings and their own work. So now you're either getting up early or you're staying up later. So what do you do to cope with all of that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that brings us to why does this all matter right now? Because as we can see, the pandemic is starting to kind of ebb a little bit in this country. Well, according to the U.S. National Pandemic Emotional Impact Report, compared to men, women reported higher rates of pandemic-related changes in productivity, sleep, mood, health-related worries, and frustrations about not being able to do enjoyable activities.
Also, women with children under the age of 18 had higher rates of clinically significant anxiety compared with men who had kids the same age and women with no minor children.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Women are, like you said, more likely to shoulder the burden of household tasks and of caregiving for elderly parents and relatives, and also child rearing than men. Not all, but,
No.
overall.
Right.
That's kind of how
I
it
guess.
falls.
I mean, my husband's he's good in that category. Not so much with the dishes, but he's good with the kids. All right. Taking this all into account, women are poised to be great consumers of alcohol, and there's a greater emphasis on women and drinking, specifically drinking to relax, to empower themselves, or to create equity with men. And our cultural shift may be causing women to adopt dangerous behaviors at a younger age.
Yeah. So that brings us to binge drinking. And this is something that you and I have wanted to talk about on this podcast for a while.
Yeah. Binge drinking is defined as a pattern of drinking that brings a person's blood alcohol concentration to 0.08 grams per deciliter or above. For women, this means drinking about 4 drinks or more in 2 hours. That's about 2/3 of a standard bottle of wine.
Yeah.
So if you're finishing off a whole bottle of wine yourself,
It's a bad day.
that's yeah. Now, is drinking for women, specifically heavy or binge drinking, more normalized now than it was 20 years ago?
This is what we're focusing on today because you and I, we were in college about 20 some years ago, the land of binge drinking and everything. And I don't know about you. I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is often ranked as like the number one party school in the country.
Yeah.
So the whole culture of alcohol, the whole culture of binge drinking probably was, and always will be huge there. And you went to school in La Crosse,
Which is known to have the most bars per capita.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's not as big as Madison.
Right.
So, I mean, there's some things to do, but there's only so many things to do.
Yeah.
So guess what college students end up doing mostly?
is drinking.
It's drinking. Yeah.
So I think for us, like binge drinking and the whole alcohol culture was mostly in our 20s.
Yeah.
I think. And it seemed to kind of fade a little bit once you're in your 30s and you started having kids. But now it seems like there's this prevalence of just almost encouraging women to drink. you know,
Yeah.
either through marketing campaigns or memes or whatever. I took the liberty of printing out some of the most popular memes for you to check out. Some of these I'm sure you've seen before.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Between that and like the t-shirts I see in stores.
Yeah.
Like, I bring my tequila with me wherever I go is on women's shirts. What are some other ones I've seen? Like something like mommy juice on it.
Yeah. Rosé all day.
Rosé all day. Yeah, that's another big one. I mean, I've seen a lot of those kind of shirts out there. It just seems to be more socially acceptable.
Right.
I remember when my kids were, I want to say they were maybe in grade school by this time, but I remember all of a sudden hearing about mommy juice a little bit more and then hearing about moms getting together during the day with their kids for like a play date.
Right.
And the kids are all playing and the moms are drinking.
Yeah.
And that's just not something me and my friends did anyway. Most of us don't really drink a whole lot, but I would never even think to do that because I would have to drive home.
Right.
You know, where that seems to be a little more acceptable to do those kind of things now.
Right. And I think we've seen, you know, marketing is something that I'm fascinated with. My background is in communication and marketing. And so I'm somebody who, you know, tends to fall prey to a lot of advertising, my husband would tell you. But it just seems that we see a lot more of advertising that's specifically geared toward women. It used to be like alcohol was the domain of like the bro culture. It was the domain of the football watching dads. It was, you know, those are the kind of alcohol advertisements that we would see all the time. But much of what the alcohol industry is doing right now to market to women, you know, they align their product with sophistication, with empowerment, with female friendship, with mommy bonding, all of that stuff. That's a move like right out of the tobacco industry playbook.
Right.
You know, the whole "you've come a long way, baby" slogan and all of that stuff.
Like, look at one of these memes you printed out. Wine is to women what duct tape is to men. It fixes everything.
Right?
Really? Okay, I don't know about that. Okay.
Well,
or what are some of these other ones?
One of the ones that, you know, that I saw, the motherhood powered by love, fueled by coffee, sustained by wine.
Huh. Okay.
You know, or I've learned to use meditation and relaxation to handle stress. Just kidding. I'm on my third glass of wine.
Ooh.
You know, and it's things like
I mean,
this.
it sounds funny at first, right? But then you're like, oh, but that might be how some people are actually like living.
Right. I've shared memes like this with my friends, you know, but I know that I'm not a big drinker. Mm-hmm. I wasn't a big drinker during COVID, mostly because at the age that I'm at, the side effects stink.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, I'm going to be hungover for 3 days, it seems like, if I have one drink.
It gets worse the older you get.
Yeah. So, you know, it was never really worth it to me. But, I mean, I can understand how women are turning to alcohol as parents or, you know, as somebody who may be overwhelmed with their job or whatever.
Yeah.
Because we see, I mean, as I was researching this podcast, there was an article that came out of a cardiology conference not too long ago that they determined that alcohol actually helps reduce stress in your brain, which helps your heart. Okay.
Huh.
But they, you know, it's like there's this health halo.
Probably momentarily.
Right. It's like there's also drawbacks to this. And what the whole point of the study was to try to gear more interest in alternative stress reduction for people, like exercise or things that are a little bit healthier. But a lot of people, I mean, that wasn't the headline. The headline is alcohol reduces stress.
Yeah.
You know, and women are under a lot of stress. We just went over that.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you want to have a drink or 5?
Right.
If you've had a particularly rough day.
Right.
You know?
Can we also talk about like
it's your
the
podcast.
names? Can we talk about the names of some of the alcohols out there? Because this kind of gets to me a little bit too. Like you said, it's right out of the playbook of the tobacco industry. right? So you have fruit-flavored beers, and there's low-cal beverages, and then there's female-specific brands. Skinny Girl comes to mind for me. Or maybe you've seen Little Black Dress or Mad Housewife.
Yeah,
That's an interesting one, isn't
I've
it?
seen Hello Kitty wine, which is a little concerning.
Oh, okay.
You know.
Or the latest thing, those Alco Pops. I just saw those.
I've had those.
Have you? I just saw them at the grocery store, and I'm like, oh my goodness, we're just making it way too easy to drink alcohol now.
Well, and if you go back to the marketing standpoint, these alcohol companies saw that women were kind of an untapped market. And so when you start seeing this uptick in alcohol use among women was right around the time they started making things like, you know, those vodka, you know, pre-made vodka drinks.
Yeah.
I don't want to say any brand names on here, but you know what I'm talking about. Or rum drinks or whatever. And those are what young girls tend to drink. They made them because they figure young women tend to not like the taste of alcohol, so they stay away from it. They don't like the taste of beer. Well, let's make something fruity and something that tastes like soda.
Right.
And, you know, hard lemonade and this, that, and the other thing.
And sadly, those are the things that'll hit you pretty hard.
Right.
You'll have quite a few and not think they're getting you drunk, and then they do.
Right. And they also are a nice way to get you into a brand.
Yeah.
And you suddenly are like, when you're older and your tastes mature a little bit more, you're more apt to pick that brand of liquor when you're out and about, you know, so they've created a consumer for life.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it seems crazy. It seems crazy to me the amount of stuff, not just t-shirts, but just like the amount of stuff that you can buy that has to do with booze.
Yeah.
Like I seem to recall when we were in our 20s, there weren't like a t-shirt that had something about alcohol was something you got on spring break.
Yeah.
You know, the 1 tequila, 2 tequila, 3 tequila floor.
Yeah.
Remember that shirt?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, those are the kinds of alcohol t-shirts. Or you might get a free beer t-shirt for something or whatever. Yeah. Now it's all very like, these are really pretty fonts and they're very like Instagrammable and, you know, sun hats, bottle openers, dish towels, napkins. Like, I mean, there's pretty much everything. Jewelry, for crying out loud. You can get anything that talks about your love of wine or, you know, whatever. It's kind of crazy to me.
Yeah.
And I think it just kind of all feeds into this normalizing of alcohol being a part of a woman's everyday life. It's your everyday arsenal of what you use to cope with the world.
Yeah.
And that's scary.
It is scary. There's one last thing to mention, and that has to do with also the focus on slimness and weight and like pink packaging, girly branding, glitter, messages of sisterhood, mommyhood, sexiness. I mean, have you ever noticed those like alcohol seltzer drinks? They tend to come in tall, skinny cans.
Oh, yeah.
And I read why that is, because that appeals to women. It's tall and skinny. So
Just
if you
like
drink
we
that,
all are supposed to strive to want
you
to
appear like, if you drink that, somehow you're going to be tall and skinny. It's weird, but like women are attracted to that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I believe it. You know, and I also, you think of all the low-calorie beer.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's kind of marketed as a health food. You know,
Right.
here's your low-calorie beer.
It's low in carbs.
It's still beer. Like last time I checked, it's still beer. Yeah, all of this kind of combines to just make it kind of scary, the amount of alcohol that we as women are kind of taking in these days. You have social media groups on, you know, Facebook and whatever, moms who drink wine moms. These have tens of thousands of members.
Really?
Yeah. And
I wasn't even aware there were social media groups like that.
Oh, yeah. And it's, you know, drinking is celebrated as this way to cope with the stress of motherhood. And it's, I mean, I'm not a mom. I can't speak to the unique stresses that come with being a mom.
It is stressful. Yeah.
But I would think, yes, you want that mommyhood bonding, but why does there necessarily need to be alcohol involved in that? Like once in a while, sure.
Because you're perceived to be more fun if you're drinking alcohol. I think that's a lot of it.
That makes sense.
Because I don't drink very much. And whenever
you're no fun.
Apparently, I'm no fun at all, because that's what I get told. Like, if you recommend to anybody, like, oh, you need to limit it to, like, 2 drinks in an evening or something, first thing out of their mouth is, well, you're no fun. I'm like, actually, I'm a lot of fun.
She's a ton of fun, everybody.
I sing, I dance.
She does.
I'm a ton of fun, even without alcohol in me. But there's this perception that you're not fun if you don't drink.
I can also see, too, now that we're kind of going back into more social situations, there's some of us, like myself, who are a little nervous about being in social environments again.
Yeah.
And I had a high school reunion a couple weeks ago, and it was surprisingly easy to say, okay, I'm only going to have 2 drinks and then have one more. Because, okay, I'm a little nervous. I haven't been in the same room with these people in a while. I need to have a drink to calm me down.
Yeah.
And then, well, now I've had a drink and I feel good. I'm going to have another one. And then all of a sudden, we're all having a great time. I'm going to have one more. And that's the one that, pushes you over the edge and you feel really crummy and yucky.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I think people just kind of forget, too, how crummy and yucky they might feel after they've drank.
Well, we don't think beyond the moment. We're not thinking of the next morning, usually. That'd be good if we could get more people to think that far in advance. Like, no, I can't have another one. But by that time, you've maybe had enough alcohol in your system. Your inhibitions are lower.
Right.
And you're not thinking clearly.
Right.
To make a good rational judgment about that or a good decision.
Well, we want to talk about why drinking is so much more dangerous for women, why this is a point we wanted to make today. Mm-hmm. And the first thing to mention is there is no gender equity when it comes to the effect of alcohol on women as opposed to men. Studies are coming out and people are finding that women are much more susceptible to the unwanted biological effects of alcohol when they consume the same amount of alcohol at the same frequency as men. Even if you make adjustments for weight, women are still always going to come out on the short end of the stick there.
Yep, and it's partly because women tend to have smaller bodies than men and differences in physiology that make blood alcohol levels climb faster and stay elevated longer.
Which I can see being a woman. Some studies have even shown that women have lower levels of certain stomach enzymes that are needed to process the toxins in alcoholic beverages.
Yes, and that stomach enzyme is called alcohol dehydrogenase.
Okay.
Women just have less of it, which means we have less of it to break down the alcohol. And if it's not broken down, it stays in your bloodstream.
Which causes the next set of problems.
Yes. According to the CDC, women are more prone to suffer brain atrophy, heart disease, and liver damage due to overconsumption of alcohol. Excessive alcohol intake can also lead to high blood pressure, heart failure, and stroke. And it can also contribute to cardiomyopathy, which is weakened heart muscles, and heart rhythm disorders like AFib.
Which we just talked about a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And although there are studies that have shown that moderate drinking, which is moderate up for you out there, is up to 1 drink per day for women. That is what moderate drinking is.
If you like wine, that's 5 ounces.
Not a lot.
No, it's not a whole glass.
Listen to our Cheers to Alcohol podcast. Moderate drinking may have benefits for the heart. There is not a definitive cause and effect. And you know that because they always say, we don't recommend that if you don't drink already that you start to get the health benefits. There are other ways to get those benefits. So if you aren't someone who drinks, don't start just because you think you're going to get some health benefit from it.
Right.
So what can women do? Now, again, we're coming out of this pandemic. Bars are opening up. Restaurants are opening up. People are being more social. What can women do to reevaluate their relationship with alcohol? And during the course of researching this, I read a lot of articles written by women who are talking about how the pandemic made them realize what alcohol and the regularity with which they drank and how much they drank affected both their physical well-being as well as their mental health.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, so that's something to consider. So to start, track your drinking. Start by assessing how much you're drinking and how much help you might need cutting back. There's a tool called Cutback Coach out there that can help by focusing on moderation, again, that up to one drink per day.
Yeah.
Tracking your drinks and then building healthier habits. And then try an intentional pause. People have heard of sober January or dry January.
Yeah.
Take a break. It doesn't even have to be a month. It can just be a couple of weeks to reassess, your relationship with alcohol and see how you're doing and identify whether you're leaning on it to manage stress or anxiety, which is important.
It's a good idea. I really like that. Just the intentional pause or
Thank
taking
you.
a break. Well, because I think anytime you start saying, oh, I'm just not going to drink alcohol anymore.
Right.
It's probably not very realistic. I mean, if you're an alcoholic, obviously, you probably need to do that. But for most other people, I think just taking that break and really assessing, like you said, really focusing on how you feel and
Right.
how you feel without the alcohol in your system and learning how you cope with different things in life.
Well, and I also think, again, with the whole moderate alcohol, people's definition of moderate versus what, the CDC wants you to believe is moderate are very different things.
That's very true.
So keep that in mind.
Yeah. Another thing we can do to reevaluate our relationship with alcohol, reassess what kinds of activities you can do socially that don't involve alcohol.
There are some out there.
Yeah, there's lots of them. Or keep the ritual, but replace the alcohol. It's now entirely possible to find great non-alcoholic wine, beer, and spirits for the times you would usually drink alcohol.
Right. Apparently, there's a whole...
There's there's mocktail bars.
There's
in
mocktail
places.
bars. There's actual spirits that taste exactly like the liquor.
And then the last thing to do, set a limit for yourself with how many days a week you will drink and how much you will drink in each situation.
I think that one's important for people who do happy hours.
Yes.
Specifically, because now that people are back in the office, you don't want to end up, I'm at 4 happy hours a week and I'm drinking 4 drinks at each happy hour.
Right.
It can add up real quick.
And after you set that limit, maybe share it with somebody so they can help reinforce it for you.
Yes.
Right? Like say, you know what? I mean, whether it's a coworker, a friend, whoever you're going out with, you can just kind of say, you know what? I'm going to really try to stick to just 2 drinks tonight.
Yeah. Can you
help me with that? Remind me to drink water or something in between.
Pick a trusted person, not someone who's going to egg you on, too.
Yes. Anything else to add, Bethany, with what we've talked about?
My main thing is I hope people don't think we would shame people for this. I mean, it's very easy to get in that slippery slope.
Yeah, we're not trying to do that. It is a very serious issue for women.
It is, and it's something that I think we're trained to not see it because alcohol is just something that's part of our culture. It's just something that's there. It's like the wallpaper until it becomes a problem.
You know what I think part of it is? Because I read this story about a woman in college who was drinking, but she didn't see it as a problem because she didn't see herself as like the homeless man on the street who was drinking, right? Like she was going to college, she was going to classes, but meanwhile she had gradually stopped going to classes or handing in homework, but she still didn't see herself as an alcoholic or somebody who had a problem.
Right. Yeah, and I think our definition of what constitutes a problem has to change because a lot of women don't even know that these physiological things can happen to them and can happen so quickly. Mm-hmm. And again, with that whole idea of moderate drinking, you ask your average Wisconsinite out there what moderate drinking is, they're going to give you a very different answer than up to 1 alcoholic beverage per day.
All right. So while it's clear that women have been drinking more and more often for years, the pandemic really threw many of us for a loop. Mm-hmm. Now, as we come out of the pandemic and ease back into some semblance of normalcy, it's a good time to really examine our relationship with alcohol and whether or not we need to change. Well, thank you for listening, everyone. And as we always say, be the ruler of your own heart. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Queen of Hearts podcast. Our podcast is recorded here at the Karen Yance Women's Cardiac Awareness Center inside Aurora St. Luke's Medical Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. For more heart-healthy tips, info, recipes, and more, Visit our website at www.KarenYachtCenter.org. Like us on Facebook at Karen Yacht Center and follow us on Pinterest. If you like what you hear, subscribe to our show and be sure to tell your friends. Until next time, ladies, be ruler of your own heart.